there were some comments from Jason Licht, Buccaneers GM, recently, and the draft is 2 weeks in the rearview mirror, but I think it's instructive when it comes to the next time, and we know it's coming, post-free agency, the pre-draft stuff hits full boil, and everybody is analyzing players 7 rounds deep and hundreds of players beyond that, and who's on the board, who's off the board. What does it take to be removed from a team's draft board? Certain things are non-negotiable. Some things are a little fuzzier than that. And when it comes to personality traits, Jason Licht has a specific category of player that some may decide to exclude, but Licht is willing in certain circumstances to make an exception. Here he is talking about it earlier this week.
We have a long process of defining who we're taking off and who we're not. Now, it's just because the guy's maybe people don't like him and he's a, D-bag or an asshole, we're not going to just automatically take him off. It's got to affect their football character, and it's got to affect the team. I mean, there's a lot of people that fit that description that are very good football players, and maybe it works in their favor. There's a difference between a bad guy and an immature person. And we'll take immature and help them develop. But, we just don't want people that are going to affect the locker room in a negative way that affects the performance of others and the team. We'll take a guy that's a little bit of a D-bagger, an asshole, that if they can get to the quarterback, for sure.
I love the candor there. It reminds me of when Jim Mora, the younger, was explaining years ago that on the offensive line, you need some dirtbags. And as he said it, he was aware, and he said out loud, that quote is going to end up on Pro Football Talk. Like, it's just like, yes, because that breaks from the 95% or more of cliched, lather, rinse, repeat drivel that we have to sift through to find the stuff worth talking about. And it speaks to a couple of things. One that is unique to football, Myles, and one that I think is part and parcel of competitive sports, regardless of what the sport is. Number one, football remains a physical, violent game. And you have to be wired in a way that you are willing to go out there and attempt to inflict physical violence on the guy across from you at a time when he is trying to do it to you. And I know that we don't talk about it that way anymore, but that's what football is. Hike, boom, collision. One guy trying to beat the other guy, trying to push the other guy this way. The other guy's trying to get around him and get to the guy with the ball so he can hit him as hard as he can in the hopes of sending the ball flying so his team can recover it. It is premised on successful infliction of violence on the other person. Beyond that,
it is.
So you need a certain amount. You need a certain amount of D-bag. Sorry, you never know when I'm going to give it to you, and you never know when you think I'm going to give it to you, and it's going to be like Eddie Murphy's ice cream cone. Want to lick? Psych. So I didn't do it on purpose that time though. It just reminds me of whether it's a basketball team, a baseball team, a hockey team, where it's also premised on nonstop physical violence with weapons and a projectile that can take your head off, literally. Yes. There's always that guy that you hate him when he's on the other team, but you'd love him when he's on your team. And I think that's the line that Light's talking about. You don't want the guy who's going to be the D-bagger asshole in your locker room. You want it to be that way to the other team. You want the other team to hate him. Yes. You want your team to love him and rally around him. And you want everybody that you ever play to just kind of like go, oh no, here comes that guy. And that's, when I was practicing law, like that's what I always strived for, because what happens is we got some undesirable personalities in the law practice. What a shock that may come to you and many others, Myles. But you want to direct that outwardly, not inwardly, not to your partners and your colleagues and the people that populate your firm. You want that attitude to be restricted to the people that you're fighting with in court. And I think that's the sweet spot. We want somebody who will treat others like a D-bagger, an asshole, but not the people that are on your team.
Yes, exactly. It's a matter of team construction. And I find team construction fascinating because you do need different guys in different roles, especially on a football team where you got 11 on the field at a time, in order to really make it work. So if you have a guy, especially rushing the passer, who is one of those two things, then yes, that makes a lot of sense. I understand what Jason Licht's talking about when he's saying, we like those guys if they're rushing the passer and they got a little bit of an edge to them, because you need that in order to get past an offensive lineman who is trying to prevent you from getting to the quarterback. So it's all about team construction. Where can you place those guys and in what rooms so that it makes sense, right? So that they are a part of the cohesive that is the team. And, you don't necessarily, I don't want a guy who's a D-bag or a bleep at, a quarterback. Like that's not necessarily great unless he knows how to then interact with his teammates, right? But I mean, in some ways, it's just like, I brought this guy up in the last segment. It's Draymond Green, right? He is a thorn in everybody's side. It's just, how can you make sure those guys know to be on the right side of the line, where it's you're helping our team by being a D-bag a little bit versus you are now hurting our team because you have stepped over the line of D-baggery to being like, I don't know, whatever is across that line. I'm not going to finish that. So you have to make sure that you are on the right side of that line. And, you can be a habitual line stepper, but like, don't go too far across it.
Well, because there are certain occasions where some of your teammates need to see a little bit of that thing that the opponents hate and fear. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. There's a certain primal reality to any contact sport where you see a certain guy coming and you think, oh, no, I got to deal with him today. I got to stay away from this guy. I don't want to deal with that guy. You don't want that guy in your locker room unless that guy knows how to harness it in the locker room to target the people who aren't carrying their weight and are bringing down the team because of it. But it's not a surprise. If you exclude from your team anybody who would be, as Jason Licht said, a D-bag or an asshole, you're not going to have the full component of personalities necessary to get the most out of your team. You need to have that edge. I mean, the first team you think of is the Miami Dolphins. Now, I don't want to name names of some of the guys on the team who might fall into that category off the field, but they lack the edge on the field, especially defensively. When you have a player on your team who says after a game, we're soft, that is not good. And that just shows there's no one on the team that guy's afraid of that's going to get in his face after he says publicly that we're soft. That confirms they're soft because there's nobody that would come to him afterward. And I'm not saying this literally in the IK and Impali Geno Smith sense, but punch him in the face when he says something like that.
Well, right. And you can't, if you're going to say we're soft, then you'd think that would have been a message, at least at first, that's internal, right? And you're like, hey, we have to do more things that make us more physical. But then I guess, if it becomes something that gets portrayed in the media that you say, hey, we are soft, and we like say that publicly, then it's like, that's in some ways supposed to be a wake up call for everybody, but like it also is very insulting. And then you make basically the head coach go up there and talk about whether or not the team is soft because you as a player have said that we're soft. So like, that's something where, you're stepping a little bit over the line of, hey, we got to keep our stuff internal versus letting everybody else know, even if it's something that, people can in theory see when we're on the field. Like some stuff you just got to keep in house.
But there's no one in the locker room that strikes the appropriate fear to get the person to realize I probably shouldn't be saying this out loud. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.